Alien Girl was ready to end it all, but the human's words made her pause. The harsh winds of Nexus Prime whipped around Roger Kane as he sat cross-legged at the edge of the crystalline cliff, his black metallic combat suit reflecting the dying light of the twin suns. Below him stretched the sprawling metropolis of New Haven, its towering spires of obsidian and chrome piercing the violet sky like daggers. The city was a testament to the resilience of humanity's colonial efforts, carved into the hostile terrain of this alien world. Roger had chosen this spot for his evening meditation, a ritual that helped him process the complexities of being one of the few humans on this distant outpost. His muscular frame remained perfectly still, despite the buffeting winds, his short dark brown hair and thick beard barely moving in the tempest. The meditation helped quiet the memories of Earth, of the wars that had forced humanity to prove itself among the stars. A sound caught his attention, footsteps approaching from behind, light and unsteady. His enhanced hearing, courtesy of his neural implants, picked up something else, quiet sobbing. Roger opened his eyes but didn't turn around immediately. The footsteps grew closer, accompanied by ragged breathing. When he finally looked over his shoulder, he saw her, a Nexian female, her violet skin almost luminescent in the fading light. She wore a sleek bodysuit that left little to the imagination, though it was clear from her demeanor that seduction was the furthest thing from her mind. Her long black hair whipped wildly around her face as she stumbled toward the cliff's edge, tears streaming down her face. Roger recognized the look in her iridescent eyes. He'd seen it before, in the mirror during humanity's darkest days. The look of someone who decided that the pain of living outweighed the fear of dying. "The view's better if you sit down first," he said casually, his deep voice carrying easily over the wind. Trust me, I've spent enough time up here to know." The Nexian woman froze, startled by his presence. Her eyes widened as she registered his species, then narrowed with a mix of confusion and anger. "This doesn't concern you, human," she spat, though her voice trembled. Roger shrugged, keeping his posture relaxed. "Maybe not, but I make it a point to never let a beautiful woman cry alone on a cliff. Bad for my reputation as a gentleman." Her lips quivered, caught between a snarl and a sob. "You don't understand. You can't understand. You're kind. You humans just waltz into our galaxy with your primitive technology and your absurd confidence, acting like you own the place. You have no idea what real suffering is." Roger let out a low chuckle, though there was no mockery in it. "Try me. I've got time, and this cliff isn't going anywhere." He patted the ground beside him. "Besides, if you still want to jump after we talk, I promise I won't stop you. Though I might join you, would be pretty shitty of me to let a lady dive alone." The absurdity of his statement seemed to catch her off guard. She blinked, momentarily forgetting her despair. "You're insane." "Probably," he agreed cheerfully. "Most humans are, according to the galactic psychological standards. Something about our reckless disregard for self-preservation and inexplicable optimism in the face of certain doom. Personally, I think they're just jealous." Despite herself, she took a hesitant step away from the edge. "Jealous? Of what?" "Of this," he gestured broadly at the city below. "Of how we can look at impossible odds and say, fuck it, let's give it a shot anyway. Of how we can lose everything and still find reasons to smile." He turned to face her fully now, his brown eyes intense. "Of how we can stand at the edge of an abyss and choose to step back, just to spite whatever pushed us there in the first place." The Nexian woman hugged herself, her shoulders trembling. "You make it sound so simple." "Oh, it's not simple at all," Roger said, his voice softening. "It's probably the hardest damn thing in the universe, but that's what makes it worth doing." He extended his hand toward her. "I'm Roger, by the way, and I'm really hoping you'll tell me your name, because beautiful, crying alien lady is a bit of a mouthful." A small, involuntary laugh escaped her lips, followed immediately by more tears. "Mara," she whispered. "My name is Mara." "Well, Mara," Roger said gently, "why don't you sit down and tell me what brought you up here? I've been told I'm a pretty good listener, even if I do tend to make inappropriate jokes at serious moments." For a long moment, she stood there wavering between the abyss behind her and the strange human before her. Then slowly, she took his offered hand and sank down beside him. It's a long story," she warned, her voice barely audible over the wind. Roger smiled warmly. Those are the best kind. The wind had calmed to a gentle breeze as Mara's story unfolded. Roger listened intently, his brown eyes fixed on her violet features as she described her life's work. Revolutionary research into quantum consciousness transfer that could revolutionize space travel and potentially save countless lives. It was supposed to change everything, Mara said, her voice trembling with suppressed emotion. My research could have allowed ships to traverse vast distances without risking crew lives. The consciousness transfer system would let pilots navigate through the most dangerous regions of space, while their physical bodies remain safe in protected facilities. Roger whistled low. That's impressive tech. Sounds like something that could have helped during the Void Wars. Mara's iridescent eyes flickered with interest. You fought in the Void Wars? Let's just say I've seen enough good people die in space accidents to appreciate what your research could mean. Roger shifted closer, his armor glinting in the fading light. So what happened? Her delicate features hardened. Director Malrin happened. He was my superior at the Nexian Science Institute. At first, he seemed supportive, even mentored me. But then, she wrapped her arms around herself, shivering despite the warm evening air. He stole everything. My research, my prototypes, even my original theories. Used his position to discredit me before I could prove anything. Roger's jaw tightened. And let me guess, now he's about to present it as his own groundbreaking discovery? Tomorrow night, Mara confirmed bitterly, at the Galactic Science Summit, he'll be hailed as a visionary while I'm... She gestured helplessly at the cliff edge. Well, you know where that led me. Not anymore, Roger said firmly. His hand found hers, warm and steady against her cool skin. That future ended the moment you chose to sit down and talk instead of jump. Mara's breath caught at the contact, her skin tingling where they touched. The intensity in his eyes made her heart race in a way that had nothing to do with her earlier despair. You don't understand, she protested weakly. The summit is tomorrow. Malrin has everything locked away in his private lab at the Institute. The security is impenetrable. A slow, dangerous smile spread across Roger's bearded face. Impenetrable to a Nexian scientist, maybe, but how about a human special operations consultant? Mara's eyes widened. You're currently contracted to evaluate Nexian security systems? His grin widened. Why do you think I picked this particular cliff for meditation? Perfect view of the Institute's main complex. For the first time since they'd met, Mara felt a spark of hope. You'd help me? Why? Roger stood, offering her his hand again. Because I hate seeing talent wasted. Because justice matters. And he pulled her to her feet, perhaps a bit closer than strictly necessary. Because any man who'd make a woman like you cry deserves to have his day thoroughly ruined. Mara found herself pressed against his armored chest, her breath catching at their proximity. Despite the hard surface of his combat suit, she could feel the heat radiating from his body. His scent was exotic, distinctly human and unexpectedly intoxicating. A woman like me, she echoed, her voice huskier than intended. Brilliant, he said softly. Beautiful. His free hand brushed a strand of hair from her face. Brave enough to step back from the edge when offered a better choice? The tension between them crackled like static electricity. Mara's skin flushed a deeper violet, her body responding to his proximity in ways that both thrilled and terrified her. I have a plan, Roger continued, though he made no move to step back. But we'll need to move fast, and you'll have to trust me completely. Can you do that? I barely know you, Mara pointed out, though she remained in his embrace. True, but you know enough to decide if I'm worth taking a chance on. His eyes sparkled with challenge. What do you say, beautiful? Ready to steal back your future? Mara knew she should think it through, should question this strange human's motives and abilities. Instead, she found herself nodding, caught up in the infectious confidence that seemed to radiate from him. Yes, she breathed. What's the plan? Roger's grin turned predatory. First, we need supplies. Then, we're going to give Director Malrin a crash course in human ingenuity. He finally stepped back, though his hand remained clasped with hers. And Mara? When this is over, I'd very much like to buy you a drink and learn more about quantum consciousness transfer. She laughed, the sound surprising her after hours of tears. Is that your way of asking me on a date? Only if we succeed, he winked. Consider it motivation. As they walked away from the cliff edge, Mara felt something she hadn't expected to feel again. Anticipation for tomorrow. The warmth of Roger's hand in hers seemed to promise that while her life might have nearly ended today, something new and exciting was just beginning. I look ridiculous, Mara muttered, adjusting the shimmering gown that hugged her curves like liquid starlight. The pre-gala reception at the Nexian Science Institute was in full swing, the grand hall filled with the planet's scientific elite. You look stunning, Roger corrected, his voice low in her ear as he guided her through the crowd with a hand at the small of her back. He traded his combat suit for formal attire, a tailored black suit that emphasized his broad shoulders and powerful frame. The way it contrasted with his tan skin and dark beard had already drawn appreciative glances from several female attendees. Remember, he continued, we're just a human security consultant and his lovely Nexian dot enjoying the party while I evaluate the Institute's defensive systems. Mara fought back a shiver at his proximity, and the fact that my former colleagues are all here to witness my apparent recovery from disgrace. Bonus, Roger grinned, snagging 2 glasses of iridescent liquid from a passing server. Nothing says, I'm doing fine, like showing up on the arm of an exotic alien gentleman. Is that what you are? A gentleman? Mara accepted the drink, using it to hide her smile. I'm wounded, he pressed a hand to his chest in mock offense. I'll have you know I'm the very model of human propriety and… He paused, eyes narrowing as he spotted something across the room. Incoming. Your former mentor at 2 o'clock. Mara tensed, but before she could respond, Roger pulled her closer, one hand sliding to her hip. Dance with me. What? Now? Trust me, he whispered, leading her onto the dance floor. Nothing discourages unwanted conversation like a couple lost in each other's eyes. The music was a traditional Nexian waltz, but Roger adapted to its alien rhythm with surprising grace. His strong hands guided her through the steps as if they'd practiced for weeks instead of the crash courses she'd given him hours earlier. He's watching us, Mara murmured, catching glimpses of Director Malron's thunderous expression. Good! Roger spun her in a way that made her dress flare dramatically. Let him see exactly what he failed to break. His eyes locked with hers, intense and focused. You're not that woman on the cliff anymore, Mara. You're a force of nature about to rain hell on his carefully laid plans. The conviction in his voice made her breath catch. When he'd outlined this part of the plan, attending the gala to map the security systems and plant necessary devices for tomorrow's heist, she'd thought it madness. Now, wrapped in his arms while her former colleagues whispered and stared, she felt powerful, dangerous. Speaking of plans, Roger continued, his lips barely moving, I've counted 4 security checkpoints between here and Malron's private lab. The good news is they're using standard Nexian protocols. The bad news is… May I cut in? They turned to find Director Malron himself, his pale violet features set in a mask of polite interest. Up close, his expensive formal wear couldn't hide the predatory gleam in his eyes. Roger's arm tightened protectively around Mara's waist. I'm afraid we're in the middle of something rather important. Oh, I insist. Moran's smile didn't reach his eyes. It's been so long since I've had the pleasure of my former protege's company, and I'm very interested in learning how she came to be here with a human security consultant. The way he said human made it sound like a slur. Roger, however, merely smiled, the same dangerous smile Mara had seen when he'd first proposed helping her. Actually, Roger said smoothly, Mara was just about to tell me more about her groundbreaking work in quantum consciousness transfer. A fascinating stuff, almost as fascinating as how similar theories might be presented at tomorrow's summit. Malron's facade cracked slightly. I wasn't aware security consultants had such specific interests. Oh, I have many interests. Roger's tone remained pleasant, but his eyes hardened. Particularly in ensuring brilliant minds receive proper credit for their innovations. The tension crackled between them, and Mara found herself holding her breath. Then Malron laughed, though the sound held no warmth. How charming! Your species' reputation for brash confidence is well-deserved. He turned to Mara. Do be careful, my dear. Humans are known for making grand gestures and promises they can't keep. Unlike Nexian mentors, Mara surprised herself with her own boldness. They only make promises they intend to break. Malron's features darkened, but before he could respond, Roger smoothly spun Mara away, guiding them through the other dancing couples until they reached the far side of the hall. "Well," he murmured, "that was informative." "How so?" "He's scared. Didn't you see how quickly he came to mark his territory when we arrived?" Roger's eyes gleamed. Men like that only show their hand when they're worried about losing control. Mara glanced back across the room. "He'll increase security after this." "Counting on it." Roger pulled her closer, using their dance as cover as they drifted near one of the security terminals. "Sometimes the best way past a wall is to make them build it exactly where you want it." As they turned, Mara felt him press something small and cool into her hand. "What's this?" "Insurance," he whispered. "Planted under any terminal you pass. By morning, we'll have a complete map of their security grid." She slipped the device into a hidden pocket, marveling at how natural this felt. Plotting and dancing in the arms of a human she'd met mere hours ago, all while her former mentor watched with barely concealed rage. "You're enjoying this," she accused softly. Roger's answering grin was positively wicked. "Sweetheart, you have no idea. There's nothing quite like watching a brilliant woman reclaim her power." His hand traced a pattern on her back that made her shiver. "Besides, the look on his face when he realized you were with me. Priceless." "And what exactly am I with you?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. His expression softened, though the dangerous gleam remained in his eyes. "Right now, my partner in crime. Tomorrow, my date for the victory celebration." He leaned closer, his beard brushing her ear. "After that, well, let's see how the night unfolds." "This can't be right," Mara whispered, her violet fingers flying over the holographic display in Roger's temporary security office. The gala continued in the distance, but they'd slipped away during a convenient distraction involving a malfunctioning drink dispenser, courtesy of one of Roger's planted devices. Roger stood behind her, close enough that she could feel his warmth. "What are you seeing?" "These requisition forms. Malron's ordered 20 neural interface units." Her voice trembled. "The demonstration tomorrow only needs one. Unless he's planning multiple transfers simultaneously." Roger leaned closer, his chest pressing against her back as he studied the display. "What's this list of names?" Mara's blood ran cold. "Staff assignments for tomorrow's summit. These people..." She pointed to a subset of names marked with red indicators. "They're all service workers, maintenance, catering, cleaning staff." "Perfect victims," Roger growled. "Low profile, easily controlled through their employment contracts. Most probably signed away their rights to refuse a reasonable participation in institute activities when they took the jobs." He's going to use them as test subjects, Mara felt sick. Transfer their consciousness into the system without consent. Probably trap them there while he demonstrates his control over the network. She turned in Roger's arms, facing him. "This is exactly what I was trying to prevent. The technology was meant to be voluntary, with safeguards and..." Roger silenced her with a finger to her lips. "Security patrol, 10 seconds." Before Mara could react, he pulled her away from the console and pressed her against the wall. His body shielded her from view as footsteps approached the office's transparent wall. To anyone passing by, they would appear to be nothing more than a couple stealing a private moment. "Play along," he murmured, one hand cupping her face while the other rested on her hip. Mara didn't have to fake the way her breath hitched or how her skin flushed a deeper violet. Roger's proximity was intoxicating, his scent filling her senses as she gripped his shoulders. The footsteps paused briefly, then continued with what sounded like an amused chuckle. "Clear," Roger said after a moment, though he didn't immediately step back. His thumb traced her cheekbone. "You okay?" "No," she admitted. "Those people, I never imagined he'd go this far." "Hey," his voice was gentle but firm. "This isn't your fault, and we're not going to let it happen." "How?" "The summit's tomorrow morning. Even if we expose the plan, the bureaucracy would take days to respond. Those people will still be at risk, and then we change the plan." Roger's eyes held that dangerous gleam again. "Instead of just recovering your research, we shut down the whole operation." "That's impossible. The security systems are designed to keep people out," he grinned, "not to contain a consciousness transfer experiment gone wrong." Understanding dawned. "You want to use his own demonstration against him." "Exactly. But we'll need help." He finally stepped back, though his hands lingered on her hips. How well do you know these potential victims? Mara quickly scanned the list again. Some of them, particularly Ren from maintenance. He used to help me calibrate equipment after hours. Perfect. Think he'd be willing to help prevent a massive ethical violation? If approached carefully, she nodded, but we'd need access to the demonstration equipment before the summit. Time to modify the protocols, add safety measures. Roger's grin widened. Good thing you're looking at the Institute's new night shift security supervisor. He pulled out an ID badge, courtesy of those devices we planted earlier. That's why you let Malron see us together, Mara realized. You wanted him to increase security, add more shifts, creating the perfect cover for a late-night inspection. He winked. I do love it when a plan comes together. A thought struck her. The consciousness transfer, it's never been tested on humans before. If something goes wrong, then I trust you to bring me back, Roger said simply, as if offering to risk his mind was nothing extraordinary. Besides, someone needs to coordinate from inside the system, and I'm not letting you take that risk. Emotion welled up in Mara's throat. Hours ago, she'd been ready to end everything, convinced she was alone in her fight. Now this remarkable human was willing to risk his very consciousness to help her save not just her research, but innocent lives. Roger, she stepped closer, placing a hand on his chest. Why are you really doing all this? The truth. He caught her hand, bringing it to his lips in a gesture that sent shivers down her spine. Because the woman I met on that cliff deserves justice. Because those workers deserve protection. His eyes darkened. And because I've spent too much of my life watching good people suffer while bastards like Malron profit from their pain. The raw honesty in his voice moved her. Without thinking, she rose on her toes and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was brief but intense, filled with everything she couldn't put into words. Gratitude, admiration, and something deeper that was rapidly growing between them. When she pulled back, his eyes were smoldering. That wasn't in the plan, he said hoarsely. I'm feeling inspired to improvise, she smiled, feeling bolder than she had in months. Problem? Only that we have work to do, and you're making it very hard to focus on saving the world. The late-night corridors of the Institute echoed with urgency as Roger and Mara hurried toward the maintenance section. Their plans had been thrown into chaos by two simultaneous developments. The unexpected arrival of Dr. Thalarin, the Galactic Science Council's most renowned ethicist, and Malron's abrupt announcement that the demonstration would begin at dawn rather than midday. This could work in our favor, Mara whispered as they rounded a corner. She'd changed from her gala gown into a technician's uniform, while Roger wore his security supervisor's attire. Doctor, Rin is famous for her stance against unethical experimentation. If we can get her attention... Incoming, Roger interrupted, pulling her into an alcove as voices approached. His body pressed against hers in the narrow space, their faces inches apart as footsteps passed. Absolutely cannot delay the demonstration, Malron's voice drifted by. The Council's ethicist is already asking too many questions. We proceed at dawn. But sir, the safety protocols are irrelevant. Once we demonstrate success, no one will care about the methods. The voices faded, but Roger and Mara remained frozen, processing the implications. And his hand had instinctively found hers in the darkness. Their fingers intertwined. He's desperate, Roger murmured, his breath warm against her cheek. That's good and bad. He'll be more likely to make mistakes, but also more dangerous. We need to split up, Mara said, though she made no move to leave his embrace. I'll find Ren and warn the other potential victims. You get the equipment ready for the consciousness transfer. Too risky if Malron catches you alone. I know these people, these corridors. Besides, she smiled, tracing a finger along his jaw. I learned from a certain human that sometimes the best defense is appearing completely confident in your right to be somewhere. Roger caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm that made her pulse race. Fine, but take this. He pressed a small device into her hand. Emergency beacon. One click, and I'll come running. My hero, she teased, but they both knew she meant it. They separated reluctantly, each heading in different directions. Mara moved through the familiar corridors with purposeful steps, her mind racing. They had less than 6 hours until dawn, and everything had to be perfect. She found Ren in the lower maintenance bay, his violet skin darker than hers and marked with the characteristic patches of a mixed heritage Nexian. He looked up from his work, eyes widening in recognition. "Doctor? Mara? They said you'd had a breakdown, that you'd been discredited, gone mad, tried to end it all?" She smiled grimly. "The night's not over yet, Ren, but right now I need your help to prevent something terrible." As she explained the situation, she saw the horror dawn in his eyes. "He's planning to use us? Without consent. Yes, and we have a plan to stop him, but we need—" "Dr. Mara?" A new voice interrupted. They turned to find an elegant Nexian woman in formal council robes standing in the doorway. Dr. Thala Rin's reputation for appearing exactly where she was needed was apparently well-earned. "This is a restricted area," Mara said smoothly, channeling Roger's confident demeanor. "Indeed. As is the private laboratory where I just observed Director Malrin preparing 20 neural interface units for voluntary demonstration participants." Dr. Rin's eyes were sharp. Curious how none of those volunteers seemed to know they volunteered. Mara's heart raced. This was either their downfall or their salvation. "Dr. Rin, and I can explain—" "No need." The ethicist held up a hand. "I've reviewed your original research proposals, Doctor. Mara, your ethical frameworks were impeccable, unlike the rushed documentation I've seen for tomorrow's demonstration." She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "I assume you have a plan to prevent this travesty?" "We do," Mara confirmed, hardly daring to hope. "But it's risky, and we'll need official backing afterward." "You'll have it." Dr. Rin's expression hardened. "The Council does not look kindly on forced consciousness manipulation. Now tell me everything." Before Mara could respond, her emergency beacon vibrated. Her blood ran cold. "Actually," she said, already moving toward the door, "I need to check on my human partner immediately. Ren, please fill Dr. Rin in on everything we discussed. Doctor, if you don't hear from us within the hour, assume Malrin has moved against us and act accordingly." She ran through the corridors, her heart pounding. The beacon had come from the main laboratory. As she approached, she heard raised voices, then a crash. The laboratory doors slid open to reveal Roger surrounded by 3 security guards, his hands raised but his stance ready for action. Director Malrin stood behind a console, looking triumphant. "Ah, Mara," he smiled coldly. "How convenient. I was just explaining to your human friend that we've moved up the schedule. In fact," he gestured to the neural interface unit humming ominously in the center of the room, "he's about to become our first successful human transfer." "Like hell," Roger growled, but one of the guards pressed a shock baton against his back. "Actually," Malrin's smile widened, "you don't have a choice. Neither of you do. After all, we can hardly have you interfering with tomorrow's demonstration. Don't worry, though. The transfer process is mostly painless. So probably—" Time seemed to crystallize in the laboratory as Mara met Roger's eyes across the room. Despite the shock baton at his back and the guards surrounding him, his expression held that familiar, dangerous glint, the one that said he was 3 steps ahead of everyone else. "Actually, Director," Roger drawled, his casual tone belying the tension in his shoulders, "I think you'll find I do have a choice. Several, in fact." Malrin scoffed. Brave words from a man about to become an involuntary test subject. "See, that's your problem," Roger continued, slowly shifting his weight. "You're so focused on controlling everything. You never stop to ask why a human security consultant would have such detailed knowledge of consciousness transfer technology." Understanding dawned on Mara just as the laboratory's emergency lights began flashing. The security network, the one Roger had spent hours evaluating, suddenly came alive with alerts. "Multiple unauthorized access attempts detected," the automated system announced. "Emergency protocols engaged." "What did you do?" Malrin snarled, fingers flying over his console. "Me?" Roger grinned. "I just made sure the Council systems flagged any attempts at unauthorized neural interface activation. Standard security protocol, really. Should be bringing Dr. Rin and her security team running right about—" The laboratory doors hissed open, revealing Dr. Rin flanked by heavily armed Council peacekeepers. But Malrin wasn't finished. He slammed his hand down on a control, and the neural interface unit began powering up with an ominous hum. "Stay back," he shouted. "One more step and I initiate a forced transfer. Let's see how the Council deals with a human consciousness scattered across the quantum network." "About that," Mara stepped forward, her voice steady despite her racing heart. Did you actually read my original research notes? Or did you just steal the results? Malloran's eyes narrowed. What are you talking about? The fail-safes, she smiled, feeling a rush of satisfaction. The ones encoded into every layer of the transfer protocols, the ones designed to prevent exactly this kind of forced consciousness transfer. You're bluffing, but of uncertainty had crept into his voice. Am I? Mara moved to a secondary console, her fingers dancing across the controls. Want to test that theory with someone else's mind? Because I designed the system, Director. Every circuit, every line of code. And I made damn sure no one could ever use it to trap another consciousness. Roger chose that moment to act. In one fluid motion, he dropped and swept the legs out from under the guard behind him. The shock baton went flying, and chaos erupted. The Council peacekeepers surged forward as the remaining guards moved to protect Malloran. But they hadn't counted on human combat training or Nexian determination. Roger moved like liquid lightning, disabling 2 guards before they could react, while Mara's fingers flew across the console, locking down the neural interface systems. Stop this madness! Dr. Rin's voice cut through the chaos. Director Malloran, you are hereby detained pending investigation by the Galactic Science Council for ethical violations and attempted consciousness manipulation. You don't understand, Malloran backed away from the advancing peacekeepers. The potential of this technology, the power to control minds across quantum space, was never the point, Mara finished, standing tall. It was meant to protect people, to give them freedom to explore without risking their physical forms. You took something beautiful and tried to turn it into a weapon. The only thing worse than a thief, Roger added, now standing protectively beside Mara, is one who doesn't understand what they've stolen. Malloran made one last desperate lunge for the main console, but Roger was faster. His fist connected with the director's jaw in a satisfyingly solid impact, dropping him to the floor. That, Roger flexed his hand, was for making her cry. As the peacekeepers moved in to secure Malloran and his guards, Dr. Rin approached Mara. Impressive failsafes, though I suspect they weren't all in place before tonight. Mara smiled, leaning slightly into Roger's solid presence beside her. Let's just say I had excellent motivation to update the security protocols while someone was creating a very convincing distraction at the gala. Speaking of distractions, Roger turned to her, his eyes intense. That was some quick thinking with the failsafe bluff. Who says I was bluffing? Mara raised an eyebrow. I meant every word. Though, she added softly, so only he could hear, I might have neglected to mention that the failsafes would only activate for non-consensual transfers. His answering grin was heated, meaning if someone were to voluntarily enter the system, they'd have complete freedom to explore, she finished, matching his smile. With the right guide, of course. Dr. Rin interrupted their moment, though her expression was knowing. The council will need your full testimony, and there's the matter of properly documenting your original research for the records. Of course, Mara straightened, professional mask sliding back into place. Though I hope the council will consider maintaining some confidentiality about tonight's events, the technology itself is still viable, still valuable, if properly controlled. I believe we can arrange something suitable, Doctor. Rin agreed. Perhaps a joint research initiative under council supervision? We could certainly use someone with your ethical framework overseeing future developments. As they discussed details, Roger's hand found Myra's, their fingers intertwining naturally. She squeezed gently, remembering how close she'd come to ending everything just hours ago on that cliff. How different everything looked now, with justice served and her future stretching out before her. A future that suddenly seemed to include a remarkably resourceful human who had changed everything with a few well-chosen words. The twin moons of Nexus Prime cast ethereal shadows across Roger's private quarters as he and Mara finally found a moment alone after the chaos at the Institute. The adrenaline of their victory had faded, leaving behind a different kind of tension, one that had been building since their first meeting on the cliff. Hard to believe it was only yesterday, Mara mused, standing by the panoramic window. The city lights below mirrored the stars above, creating a symphony of illumination that made her violet skin glow. She changed back into her original outfit, the provocative lines a stark contrast to the professional persona she'd maintained during the council's preliminary investigation. Having second thoughts about not jumping, Roger asked, approaching from behind. His formal attire was slightly disheveled from the earlier fight, adding a rugged quality to his already impressive presence. Only about how close I came to missing this. She turned to face him, her expression soft. Missing you? His hand came up to cup her face, thumb tracing her cheekbone just as it had during their stolen moment in the security office. I'm glad I could change your mind. You did more than that, Mara leaned into his touch. You gave me back my purpose, my future. Her hands found his chest, feeling his heartbeat through the fabric. You showed me there was something worth fighting for. And now? His voice was husky, eyes dark with desire. What are you fighting for now? Instead of answering, Mara pressed closer, eliminating the space between them. Their lips met in a kiss that held none of the hesitation of their earlier encounter. This was pure need, months of suppressed passion and the night's emotional roller coaster crystallizing into something primal and urgent. Roger's arms encircled her, strong and protective, while her fingers tangled in his hair. The contrast between his tanned skin and her violet tone was mesmerizing in the moonlight. Their different physiologies created an intoxicating dance of familiar and alien sensations. Are you sure? Roger pulled back just enough to ask, his breath warm against her lips. After everything you've been through? I was ready to end it all yesterday, Mara whispered, pressing closer. But you made me pause, made me feel alive again. Her hands traced the muscles of his shoulders. Now I want to feel everything. His response was immediate and passionate, lifting her easily as if her alien biology posed no challenge to his human strength. They moved together through the moonlit room, every touch an exploration, every kiss a declaration. The night became a blur of sensation and emotion. Their different species created moments of discovery and delight, each new experience cementing their connection. Roger's human passion complemented Mara's Nexian grace in ways that transcended their biological differences. Later, as they lay tangled in sheets that had witnessed their intimate cultural exchange, Mara traced patterns on Roger's chest. I never understood before, she mused. Understood what? His fingers played with her hair, now thoroughly disheveled from their activities. Why humans have such a reputation across the galaxy? Everyone talks about your species' determination, your resilience. She propped herself up to look at him. But it's more than that, isn't it? You don't just survive, you embrace life completely. Throw yourselves into every experience with total commitment, Roger grinned, pulling her closer. Says the woman who went from contemplating the void to helping stage a coup against her corrupt mentor in less than a day. Because you showed me how, she settled against him, enjoying the heat that radiated from his human form. You humans have this amazing ability to find hope in the darkest moments, to turn despair into determination. We're stubborn that way, he agreed, kissing her temple. Though I have to admit, having a brilliant, beautiful alien scientist to impress was pretty motivating. Mara laughed, the sound full of joy, so different from the despair that had brought them together. And what happens now? The council will want to start the official investigation soon. There will be hearings, documentation. Now, Roger rolled them over, hovering above her with that dangerous smile she'd come to adore. We take advantage of having the rest of the night to ourselves. Then tomorrow, we face whatever comes next. Together. Together, she agreed, pulling him down for another kiss. I like the sound of that. As they lost themselves in each other again, Mara marveled at how completely her world had changed. Yesterday, she'd seen no future worth living for. Now in the arms of a human who'd refused to let her give up, she saw endless possibilities stretching before them. The twin moons continued their dance across the sky, witnessing the union of two beings from different worlds who had found something extraordinary in each other. Their passion was more than just physical. It was a celebration of life, of second chances, and of the remarkable way fate had brought them together on that cliff edge. The sunrise over Nexus Prime painted the sky in passionate hues as Roger and Mara climbed the familiar path to their cliff. She wore a shimmering dress that caught both the breeze and his appreciative glances, while he'd chosen to wear the same black armored suit from their first meeting, though this time, his intentions were far from meditation. You're staring again, Mara teased, swaying her hips with deliberate grace. Can't help it, Roger grinned, reaching out to pull her against him. I'm still not convinced you're real. Maybe I hallucinated the most beautiful alien in the galaxy. Shall I prove how real I am? She pressed closer, her violet skin practically glowing in the dawn light. Her fingers traced the edges of his armor. Though you're a bit overdressed for what I had in mind. Am I? His voice dropped to a husky whisper. And what exactly did you have in mind, Doctor? Mara. A thorough investigation of human-Nexian relations, she purred, her fingers finding the clasp of his armor. For science, of course. Of course, Roger chuckled, his hands sliding down her sides. Always the dedicated researcher. They reached the cliff's edge, now transformed from a place of despair to their private sanctuary. The smart fabric blanket adjusted to the rocky surface as Roger pulled Mara into his lap, her back against his chest as they watched the twin suns rise. Remember what you said to me here? She asked, tilting her head back to meet his gaze. About humans having an absurd confidence? He nuzzled her neck, making her gasp. Though I prefer to call it determined optimism. Show me, she challenged, turning to straddle him. Show me that famous human determination. His response was immediate and passionate, one hand tangling in her hair, while the other traced patterns on her bare skin. The morning air was cool, but neither of them noticed, lost in their own heat. You're playing with fire, beautiful, Roger growled, his beard tickling her neck as he traced a path of kisses along her collarbone. The armor's outer layers had been strategically discarded, leaving him in the form-fitting undersuit that left little to imagination. Maybe I want to burn, Mara challenged, her violet skin flushing darker with desire. Her fingers traced the muscles of his chest through the material. You humans run so wonderfully hot. The rising suns cast their joined shadows across the rocky surface, a dance of alien and human forms becoming one. The city below was awakening, but they were lost in their own world above it all, where the species differences meant nothing compared to the fire between them. Tell me again, Roger demanded softly, his hands exploring the curves of her body through the shimmering dress. Tell me what you were thinking when you first saw me here. I thought you were a mirage, she admitted, arching into his touch. A warrior poet meditating at the edge of the world. Then you spoke, and suddenly... She gasped as his fingers found a sensitive spot. Suddenly the void didn't look so appealing anymore. Their passionate encounter on the cliff continued, a celebration of life and connection that transformed the once desolate spot into their own paradise. The twin suns climbed higher as they explored each other with increasing ardor, their bodies moving together in perfect harmony. You humans, Mara breathed against his lips. You're absolutely intoxicating. The way you throw yourselves into everything. Every touch, every kiss. Roger smiled against her skin. Just wait until I show you how humans celebrate properly. His hands roamed possessively over her curves, claiming every inch of her violet skin as his own. The breeze carried their sighs of pleasure across the cliff face, mingling with whispered endearments and passionate promises. Their joining was both tender and fierce, a perfect blend of human intensity and Nexian grace. Later, wrapped in the blanket and each other, they watched the city below. Roger traced lazy patterns on Mara's bare shoulder, making her shiver despite the warmth. A credit for your thoughts, he murmured. I was thinking about quantum entanglement, she said, pressing closer to his heat. How two particles, once connected, remain linked no matter the distance between them. Are you comparing our relationship to quantum physics? His laugh rumbled through his chest. Maybe. She turned to face him, her eyes sparkling with mischief, though I don't recall particle physics being quite this satisfying. Their passionate aftermath conversation continued as the morning light bathed them in its warm glow. Roger's fingers traced the curve of Mara's spine, making her purr with contentment. Speaking of satisfaction, she murmured, trailing her fingers through his chest hair, I think we've thoroughly proven human-Nexian compatibility. I don't know, he teased, rolling them so she was beneath him again. I believe proper scientific method requires multiple trials for accuracy. Is that so? Her violet skin darkened with a blush as his beard tickled her neck. And how many trials would you suggest, security consultant Kane? As many as it takes to get conclusive results, Doctor. Mara, his voice was husky against her ear. I'm very dedicated to thorough research. Their playful banter dissolved into more passionate expressions as they celebrated their connection again. this time with the full light of day illuminating their joined forms. The cliff that had once represented an ending now witnessed their new beginning. Afterward, as they shared the contents of their forgotten picnic basket, Mara traced the muscles of Roger's arm. "The council wants to fast-track our consciousness transfer project." "Oh." He fed her a piece of exotic fruit, his eyes darkening as she deliberately licked his fingers. "Planning to have your way with my mind as well as my body?" "Well," she purred, "I do need a test subject who trusts me completely. Someone willing to let me explore every aspect of their consciousness." Roger pulled her into his lap, the blanket barely preserving their modesty. "Trying to seduce your way into my neural pathways? Beautiful? Is it working?" She rocked against him teasingly. His response was to capture her lips in a searing kiss that left them both breathless. When they finally parted, his eyes held that dangerous gleam she'd come to love. "You had me at quantum consciousness transfer," he admitted, "though the current method of persuasion is definitely appreciated." They spent the rest of the morning alternating between passionate encounters and planning their future. The city below continued its daily rhythm, unaware of the profound connection being forged above. As the twin suns reached their zenith, they finally prepared to leave their sanctuary. Roger helped Mara back into her dress, though his assistance involved far more touching than strictly necessary. "We should make this a regular celebration," he suggested, securing his armor while Mara attempted to fix her thoroughly disheveled hair. "Weekly clifftop rendezvous to honor the moment you didn't jump." "The moment you made me pause," she corrected, pressing against him one last time. "The moment a stubborn human refused to let me give up." "Best decision I ever made," he murmured against her lips. "Though I have to admit, I never expected saving a beautiful alien would lead to all this." "All what?" she teased. "The groundbreaking research? The council position? The interspecies scandal?" "The love of my life," he said simply, making her breath catch. "My brilliant, beautiful quantum physicist who looks at human consciousness and sees possibility instead of chaos." Their final kiss atop the cliff was both a celebration of what they'd found and a promise of what was to come. As they made their way back down the path, hand in hand, both knew that while their story had started with despair, it would continue with passion, purpose, and the kind of love that transcended species. The cliff remained behind them, no longer a place of endings, but a testament to new beginnings, to the power of connection, and to the remarkable things that could happen when human determination met Nexian brilliance. And if they returned to their special spot regularly for more research into human-Nexian relations, well, that was just good scientific practice.